Hello everybody, welcome back to Sound Design September. Today is day 19 and today we're going to be taking a look into some FM synths. So these are the synths in question over here and we're going to get a very bubbly texture out of that. And this patch uses a technique that is sometimes referred to as designer FM. So what that actually means is that the curve that you see over here has been designed to actually work as an FM source for this particular oscillator. Now when it comes to designer FM, I've talked about it before. I've actually talked about FM a few times now in just explaining what it does. So that is not what is going to happen inside of this video. I just want to show you the fact that we have this sine wave over here with two voices of unison, a little bit of detune, and then the FM is being randomly modulated by a note on random. We're also randomly modulating the wavetable over here, and you can see that this wavetable is nothing more than a morph between a sine wave and a triangle wave. This is just so that we get a little bit of an extra difference in the texture every time that it plays. But the real magic is what is happening with the noise oscillator and the FM being used from the noise oscillator. What you can do with the noise oscillator is you can drag in shapes like this. So I can drag it in like this and then just let it go. And every time that I update the shape, I'm going to have a different FM type. So you can hear that you can just draw in here and experiment with it, and that is really the cool part of a sound like this. Just the fact that you have almost an unlimited range of shapes that you could draw in and that you can play with to get different sounds out of it. Of course, really the only annoying thing is that you constantly have to drag it in there in order to see your changes. I don't think there's a way around that in terms of just being able to draw in kind of the FM modulator that you want. When it comes to FM modulators, I also have a wavetable spec that comes with a lot of designer FM modulators here. You can see we have 23 of them. So these can be used to modulate from as well. So if I just quickly set this to FM from B instead, we get something like this. One of my favorite ones is the one that we see over here, which is the SSQ carrier. This is actually a very nice one if you turn it all the way up like this and set it to the same octave. Honestly, you get the best sounds out of it if you set the warp all the way up, but then we're going to get a very stable sound. Just you can imagine you can play up here as well, maybe having everything an octave lower. So in this case, what you could do is maybe something like this here. So overall, this kind of FM is really versatile and that you can get a whole bunch of different textures out of it. You just have to kind of get an intuition for what the FM is going to do. And honestly, the best way to get that kind of intuition is just to play with it a lot. So let's do that by making another patch. What I'm also quickly going to do is duplicate this patch so that I can restore one of the versions to the old one. Because of course, all of these patches are going to be available up on my Patreon page. So for the Patron, what we would want to do is set this to the noise oscillator and then set this back to roughly over here. So this is the old patch again. I actually didn't go over the processing, but there's not a lot going on in terms of interesting stuff. We have a compressor which is set to multi-bed mode here. And then we have our standard 1/8 dotted ping pong delay. And then finally a high cut to remove the lowest frequencies. Now to make more synths like this, what we can do is we can add a vital over here, because again, you're not limited to one synth. Each synth is going to have its own unique FM texture. And in this case, what I want to do is I want to set up an FM setup with 2 basic shapes here. So let's set this maybe to a triangle here, and let's set it an octave or 2 lower. Let's go with 1 for now. And then we'll set this to FM from oscillator 2. We'll set the phase randomization all the way down. And we can start to play with some different FM setups, try to experiment a little bit. Let's add a 3rd wave into the mix here by setting FM from oscillator 3 here. Let's turn both of these down. And you can imagine that there's interesting ways in which you can combine all of this. So let's use some randomization over here. Again, we'll set this all the way down and to sample and hold, so that it's just going to generate 1 random value per note. And now again, we can use something like the arpeggiator to chop up those notes by placing that over here and then just copying over the MIDI. In this case, the MIDI is just 1 long note here. In this case, because we have such short MIDI notes with this gate over here being set so low, we want a little bit of extra release. Add our delay here. As you can see, the processing is very, very simple. What we have to do over here, there's nothing really exciting going on in the effects. But this new synth now is sounding somewhat like this. And really the fun part of the sound design in here is now going in here and seeing which different tonalities you can get to work. By changing wavetables, by changing FM amounts, by changing pitches here. Maybe let's do something like -2 octaves over here. You can even imagine that modulating some of these parameters like this FM amount over here in this particular setup would be really cool. Another thing that we can do is use some filter FM. Now that I think of it, this is actually a way that we can just draw into an LFO and have it immediately apply without having to drag it into anything. So in this case, let's set this to key track. And this is really where the power of Vital comes in. You can just key track an LFO like this. Let's turn the smoothing all the way off so that it doesn't affect our shape. And let's assign this to a filter. In this case, what I would like is something like a cone filter here. Maybe the spread cone would be good for this, because we can set its size like this. And then we can just add a slight bit of like the actual cone filter wherever we want. Let's start with a little bit of a simpler setup over here. In this case, I'm not really getting the tonality that I want out of Filter FM. It is also something that I've talked about before in other videos, but I don't really find myself using that technique very often because it is a very unreliable technique. Of course, it's going to depend on what type of filter that you're using. We could also go for maybe a bandpass filter here. Maybe we get some better sounds out of that. There's definitely some cool ideas in there, but I'll leave enough room for you guys to experiment with all of that. So that's actually going to be the sound for today. I hope that you can see that there's just a massive range of tonalities that you can get out of here. So it's not really useful for me to sit here and say it like, okay, you set that preset to that preset to that. I just want to maybe be a little bit more experimental and show a little bit more just the different tonalities that you can get out of that by freely moving some parameters around without having to explain exactly what each step is doing. And that is also because when it comes to this kind of FM, it's really hard to wrap your head around what is actually happening in terms of what the actual process is. For a lot of the other synths, it's a little bit easier for me to actually just explain what is going on in technical terms. But as I said in other videos, FM is such a different topic. It is really hard to actually tell you what, for example, the waveform is doing. When you see an FM setup like this, where we have the double FM and then also the filter FM, it's just really hard to even predict what is going on and therefore much harder still to explain it. So I hope that you enjoyed this either way, and remember that all 3 of the presets are going to be available up on my Patreon page. So if you want to support the channel, that is a great way to do it. Another way to support the channel is by watching some more of my content. So I'll leave 2 videos up on the screen for you to choose from. So just pick one and enjoy, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.